Hi there, my name is Mark Robinson. I'm the co-founder of Ellandi and chair of the government's High Street Task Force. Today we're coming together to discuss designing the new experiential High Street, and we have an outstanding panel. Now, I often say that, but this time I mean it with utmost sincerity. My role today is very much to provoke a conversation and let the fabulous people we've got lined up to speak with you explain their view on life. So first up is Mark Phillipson. So
Hi, Mark.
Hi, Mark. Mark, I know well. I think it is fair to say, and I don't want it to blush, but he's probably one of the most well-respected retail property advisors in the UK, and also one of the nicest guys in the industry as well. I've heard quite a few reports that in lockdown in 2020, there's been a rash of entrepreneurialism, and there's never before been quite so many new businesses formed. And I think Mark is responsible for a number of them. So first off, he founded Eccleston Capital. Very quickly, formed a joint venture called Quadrant Repurpose, which is about repurposing department stores, and more recently has launched Total Turnover Solutions, which is about finding a new way for owners and occupiers to work together, both of which we will be going into some detail. So good to see you again, mate. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good to see you.
So one of your businesses is about repurposing department stores, and there's, frankly, that's never been more needed. And there's a lot of fabulous department store buildings out there. So which one would you like to get your hands on, and what would you do with it?
Well, if it was for sentimental reasons, the one I'd want to get my hands on would be the Bins department store in Lincoln, but sadly that's already been done, because that's the first department store I ever went into with my mum on a Saturday afternoon, and she would be furious that her favourite cafe had been destroyed and it was going to be turned into a hotel and student accommodation. But for local interest, I would have loved to have done that, but Patrizia are doing it with some of my colleagues at Colliers. But I think, it's very difficult to say of the ones that need help to pick just one of them. I mean, an easy one would be, say, the Debenhams in Manchester that AM Alpha are going to do, because, brilliant city, really vibrant. It's nearly 500,000 square feet. So you can do you've got so many options in terms of the physical size of it, whether it's healthcare, residential, offices, doing something like the Ned in the city in terms of all the different restaurants and ancillary uses with it. It's just such a big space. So, a project like that would be great because you've got such an enormous canvas in a brilliant city as well. That would probably be a favourite.
Fantastic. Funny enough, one of my first department store memories is probably the Bins in Sunderland, and people listening in probably wouldn't think of us as two Northerners, but
yeah.
I'm from as well. Next up, we have Hugh Seaborn, who's the CEO of Cadogan. Now,
good morning, Mark.
Hi, Hugh. Now, Hugh has a quite remarkable career. He has spent the last 12 years looking after the Cadogan estate, and for those who don't know, Cadogan estate is one of the great London estates that actually looks after the fabulous bits of the King's Road. Now, all of King's Road is great, but Hugh's bit in particular in terms of retail is the excellent bit. It's the Chelsea Barrack development opposite Peter Jones, and then a great swathe of the King's Road as well. And prior to that, Hugh had the privilege of looking after the Portman estate. Again, obviously, Portman estate centered on Portman Square, but a lot of retail around there as well. So this is a guy who literally plays Monopoly for a living. Now, that sounds terribly glamorous and an awful lot of fun. There's got to be a downside. I'm struggling to think what it might be, but what is the downside of looking after all these?
It's wonderful seen in that way, Mark, and you're very eloquent. Incidentally, my first department store was Bins in Hull, where I got lost and ended up on the Tannock.
There's all these strong northern accents coming through.
Yeah, no, I'm very fortunate in the role I do. It's wonderful to have a role where together with the team we can make an impact on a significant part of London. And that's a great privilege. And with privilege, I guess, comes responsibility. And I'm very aware of that, as are all the team here. And I think one of the things that there's many challenges to choose from, to be honest, never more than now. But one of the things I would choose is our desire to be constantly looking for a way to contribute to the local community. And that sounds a bit left field for what is a property business. We're really, if you boil this down, a retail and residential property company. But if we can contribute to the local community in a lasting way, and be meaningful to not just current generations, but make sure we're relevant to future generations, then our long-term survival and prosper is assured. And so, we do things like Pavilion Road's the one that we're very proud of, but there's many other things we do which receive less attention. So Pavilion Road was a way of bringing in artisan food users, and it's been a hive of activity to the local community, and it's very much complementary to the area. But these things take a long time to identify and deliver, so we're constantly looking out for them. We provide subsidized community housing in the area, so that people who support the community can live in the area at affordable levels for their salaries. These things don't get much airtime, but I think they're very important contributions that over time helps us as well.
Super, thanks for that. Now, last and by no means least at all, we have the incredible Amy Lamé, the Night Tsar of London, as appointed by the Met. Now, I really don't know where to begin with your CV. I mean, you are the polymath's polymath. You're an Olivier Award-winning arts company director. You're a politician. You were the mayoress of Camden, 2010-2011. You're an author, writing historical books and books for children. You've got 2 honorary degrees. Where do you get time to do all this stuff?
Well, as nights are, I thrive at night. It gives me extra time to get everything done.
Given your absolute passion for London nightlife, the question I wanted to ask you is, and you've been a fierce campaigner to look after London's nightlife as it's somewhat being swept away for various reasons. So what's the favourite nightclub or late night music venue that we've lost, and why?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here, Mark, and thanks for inviting me along. And I just also want to establish I've never been to a bins in my life.
In New Jersey, is that what you're saying?
So I'm going to steer clear of that, but I can definitely talk about nightclubs, pubs, bars, and all of the great venues that, before COVID were just contributing to one of the many reasons why London is the best place in the world at night. And so just a couple of the places that are really meaningful to me, have been closed for so long now, and we're working as hard as we can in City Hall to make sure that when they are able to reopen, when the time is right, that they not only have had all the support that they need financially and in terms of advice and advocacy, but also that they're reopening in an environment where people feel comfortable and confident to go out. And that's very pertinent to the conversation that we're going to be having today. So I would focus on 2 places. I think that will be my first 2 stops. The first will be the Royal Vauxhall Tavern, which is a big old pub that I, previous to my Night Tsar role, worked very hard to help save. We're still not entirely there, but it is an icon of London's LGBTQ plus scene. And I've been running my club night there every Saturday for 25 years. And also the Dublin Castle here in Camden. I really love that place as a grassroots live music venue, family owned and run, and is the very essence of London. These are the kinds of places that if we lost them, London would truly lose a bit of its heart and soul.
Now, if we had an hour, I'm sure you and I could solely talk about what a mess they're making of 9 Elms and Vauxhall, but that's not the topic of this debate. Anybody who follows me on Twitter will know I'm not happy about what's happening there. Yeah. Anyway, okay, so we are here to discuss designing the new experiential high street. Now, with all due respect to our hosts, I hate that title, and I really hate it for 2 reasons. One, the use of high street. It's this catch-all phrase that everybody uses, and it just muddies the debate. And the other way is the way that experiential is bandied around as if it's some sort of cure-all. So I'll break that down into 2 discussion points, if you'll allow me. So in terms of retail, as I said, people use the word high street to cover all retail, and of course they often mean license and leisure as well, which is Amy's passion and her background. But not all retail was created equal. And as we've seen the temporary liftings of lockdowns come through, I think we've seen different retail places recover at different rates. So given what we've seen in 2020, who do we think the winners and the losers are going to be within retail? And for now, so I don't have to keep qualifying. Whenever I say retail, Amy, I do mean F&B, licensed leisure, and nightlife as well, if you'll forgive me that. So who are going to be the winners and losers as we come out of lockdown, please, guys?
Well, I think probably, if I could start on that one, I mean, the guys that seem to be winning quite clearly at the moment are the sort of the essential retailers, you know, the anything to do with healthcare and food, basically, and value. And as we've seen quite clearly, retail parks have suffered less than high streets have, probably because it's far easier to just drive there in your own car, shop at your own convenience, and avoid other people in bigger physical retail units. So I think town centres have been particularly badly hit by all this, but ultimately I do believe in their future, as I suspect everybody else does. People do like, especially the more attractive town centres, as a place to shop, whereas sitting at home online is buying rather than shopping. And I think I agree with you with this phrase experiential. It is bandied around a lot. I think you can only really refer to it as, you know, what you get when you go to one of the big regional malls, where the whole experience of retail is bigger and better. Double height shop fronts, you know, bigger shops, greater variety of offer, principally in the fashion sector. But it's all polarizing now. It's either got to be, you know, high fashion and scale, or convenience. So I think anything in the middle is going to suffer. But coming out of where we are at the moment, I think it's going to be the polarization at one end or the other, convenience or, you know, scale, perhaps.
We'll come back to the experiential word that I have a problem with in a second. But Hugh, over to you now. Obviously, something we've seen at the High Street Task Force is the fact, and this is well publicised, city centres have been worse hit than maybe provincial town centres, or they're badly damaged, or the way that London suburbs have responded. So have you got a particular problem, and is it soluble?
Well, look, I think you know, it's well established really that COVID's accelerated existing themes. So I can see the successes polarizing as they were before COVID on luxury on one end and value at the other end. And I think the challenge is for the middle market. And we're seeing that at the moment. It's just speeded up. I think there's greater challenges for the middle market where there has been aggressive ownership. So it's been rolled out and stretched. And I think that's an issue we haven't really got back to, but we're seeing more distress amongst those sorts of businesses. And you know, the ones in the press at the moment are Debenhams and the Arcadia Group, which are good examples. But I think the winners will be retail that is part of a much broader, compelling offer. And you know, you've just clarified that you include leisure and hospitality and entertainment in the word retail. I think it's really important we do so, because we've got to make sure it's relevant to the market, obviously, but also relevant to the local community. And there we've been, it's all relative. It's been brutal, but relatively fortunate, because there seems to have been a sort of a donut effect through the lockdowns. And in the gaps between lockdowns, this area has traded quite well because it's a residential area and people are stuck at home and looking for something to do. And the areas we've seen particularly successful have been around food, and there, you know, I'm with you. I'm not keen on the jargon, and experiential is part of that. I think the concepts around what's wrong with retail are quite simple. It's the practicalities of putting them right that's tough. But there, you know, we've seen on Pavilion Road, where we've got lots of artisan food, a great deal of excitement locally, and people were able to get together, but it was open air and there's lots of space, so it was very safe. And in a way, treat themselves to a finer cut of meat, or the fishmongers, or a loaf of bread. And the experiencing comes, it's that experience, isn't it? It's the smell of the bread, and it's the people you talk to in the transaction. And it can be the same with at the luxury end with Hermes. You know, if you bought a handbag online, as Mark says, that's buying things, but the experience of going to Hermes and enjoying the whole gamut of what they offer is a very different thing indeed, and well worth preserving. And, you know, through COVID, where we've all been locked up and our experiences have been limited, I think people have got a more acute idea of what's important to them. So, of course, convenience is necessary at the moment, and safety, so we can transact online, we can buy things. But I hope that there'll be a greater understanding of the value of human interaction and experience, and just smelling the bread or smelling the coffee or seeing other people regularly and saying hi to them.
There's many cases in retail where we do need to wake up and smell the coffee at the moment. I have to investigate those in a second. Amy, you just declared that London is the best nighttime economy in the world. I mean, that is your job to a degree. I've got friends in Berlin and Barcelona who might disagree. What parts of the nighttime economy are going to bounce back first and quickest?
Well, it's interesting. You know, before COVID, we were on a real upward trajectory here in London. We had 1.3 million people regularly working at night, and that's across all sectors at night. So our economy between 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. is really my focal point. It encompasses bars, pubs, and clubs and that traditional nighttime economy, but actually my role is much wider and more cross-cutting than that. We knew that the economy at night was growing faster than it was during the day pre-COVID. So we had everything to play for. And we had just finished a pilot scheme, our nighttime enterprise zone pilot scheme that ran in Waltham Forest over the space of a few months. And, you know, we were able to show how activating our high street, you know, improving the public realm, opening shops up later, really answering to what people wanted rather than what retailers thought people wanted. We were able to increase footfall on the high street by 21%. And so we've taken that learning and tried to apply some COVID learnings from it as well. And so my prediction really is that on the other side of this, when we're able to reopen safely, that those winners will be those that take into consideration this ecosystem, that it's not just about retail, but it's about this, you know, you don't like the word experiential, but it is about the experience. And so, you know, this isn't just about going into a shop. It's like, what is it like strolling on the street with your friends or your family while you're hopping between the shops? Is there a place for you to stop and have a coffee, have a meal, have a cocktail? Is there the opportunity to avoid crowds, say by stretching out our hours of operation? So whereas places used to close, say at 6 o'clock on the high street, what if we were able to keep them open till 8, 9 p.m.? And would that increase footfall overall, but actually make the experience for people much better? So I think places that are able to respond to that will do well when we're able to reopen.
You've raised a really interesting point that was occurring to me as you spoke. Now, I passionately believe that it is the leisure economy that is really going to lead bringing the vitality back to many, many of our places across the UK. Now, there often can be a bit of a conflict here, though. So you mentioned the idea about it being open till 9 o'clock, and you're a passionate campaigner for a vibrant nighttime economy. Hugh wants vitality in his landed estate in southwest London, but I'd be guessing that Hugh's average resident is probably trending over the night clubbing age. And obviously there can be a conflict between that vibrancy that you're advocating and the estate management issues that landed estates like Hugh's has, or even local authorities have.
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to say I'm not advocating for nightclubs on every corner. What I'm advocating for is an extension of operating hours so that those businesses that have been closed for so long are actually able to recoup some of their losses, and that we're able to answer to the needs of people in our city. I'd be interested to hear what Hugh says, but I just want to make it clear. I'm not saying
late night bars can be an issue. Anyway, Hugh, over to you.
Hugh, yeah, it's interesting. I've got mixed feelings, in fact, because King's Road very much its reputation came out of nightlife and the night economy, and there's still some great nightclubs on King's Road, but it's part of a residential area, so it's how it interacts sympathetically. But there's no doubt that sort of nighttime economy, that leisure economy, and culture as well, brings a diversity of interest and more visitors. And for us, it's part of we consider the layers of uses that go to make it an interesting community, a place which attracts this vitality we're talking about. And so, for example, we it's very different to a nightclub, Amy, but we run and operate Cadogan Hall, which is a music venue. So it has its moments. And we make sure we have nightclubs and we have pubs, and we own them partly so they are retained and preserved, because what happens in Chelsea is pubs are converted into houses if we don't. So we've got 9 or 10 pubs, and their neighbours aren't always they're not the most popular thing to their neighbours always, but they're part of the rich tapestry that contributes to the area. And so I find it's interesting with this discussion, and I find myself doing it too, is we're not talking so much about retail, we're talking about what lights up an area, what makes people interested and drawn to an area, and retail is a part of that. And I think, Mark, you were talking about the phrase high streets being overused. I think it is, because I think, not all high streets are retail, if you like. And I think we're going to have to get used to this in future as a much more broad mix. And make sure what we call shops now are filled with useful things, useful uses, if you like, that appeal to the local market and the local community.
You've hit on a few things there, actually, Hugh, because it doesn't seem that long ago that we had such a problem with any tables and chairs being outside a cafe or it's not that long ago that the planners really were up against that, and it's only the sort of Starbucks and Costas that have started to sort of battle away at that and wore them down a bit. But if you think of, okay, well, how could a town centre be more attractive and appealing versus, say, an out-of-town retail park or something like that? It is that mix, that sort of, and I think they do it much better perhaps on the continent than they do here, is that if you do have that mix of coffee shops, artisan butchers, bakers, candlestick makers, all those sort of more local interest, intermixed with sort of even the ability to sit on the street in terms of tables and chairs outside, and the mix as you walk down, and you do get it a bit on the King's Road in particular, as you walk down the street. It's more interesting to look at each individual stage rather than just a straight run of shops with no interruptions. And a retail park, it might be convenient for parking, but it is just a straight parade of retail frontage or whatever. It's not, it doesn't, you're encouraged to efficiently shop and leave, not shop and dwell for a while. So I think in terms of the vitality of town centres, the more different uses of F&B and encouraging people to dwell longer, and any retail offer that's just more interesting because of its local interest or whatever, all of that sort of thing can be brought back. But it is going to take a bit of a, let's face it, the previous financial dynamics facing town centres haven't really encouraged this sort of thing, because it's all about covenant strength, maximum rent, maximum returns, and maybe less so about tenant mix and use. But I think that's now going to reverse.
Thanks for that, Mark. I mean, it's really interesting that you pick up on this cafe culture. And one of there's not many good things that have come of COVID, but one of them is the tactical urbanism movement, which is doing stuff immediately to make a place better. And sometimes you're going to get it wrong, but often you'll get it right. So this idea that local authorities are being far more amenable to flexing licensing, to flexing street licenses, I think it's been really encouraging, and it's shown a really strong way forward. But if we can draw a line under the nightclub chat, all I want to say on the subject is I'm glad that my clubbing days were so long ago they hadn't invented camera phones. Anyway, so we were going to talk about experiential a bit, but we're having such a good conversation. I'm going to move it on a little bit. My frustration with experiential, given that we're London based and Amy looks after London and Hugh's got his London estate, is I do worry that the narrative around experiential gets lost or doesn't translate when we're talking about having to make interventions in some of the more left behind places. Am I right to have that concern, or am I just being a bit oversensitive because I'm from Hartlepool?
I think there is concerns, and Mark's already mentioned the financial dynamics. COVID's bringing, of course, COVID's a dreadful thing, but actually it is bringing many things that may help high streets, even amongst the carnage. And we've just talked about, you used the phrase tactical urbanism, Mark, which is a great one. I'm going to hang on to that. But our experience here in Kensington and Chelsea is that we're getting lots of support from the local authority, and they've been very pragmatic in a way which would have been frankly unimaginable in the past. So you talk about outside seating. We were able between lockdowns to put out 500 seats with tables, and the area came to life, and it was outside and there was space, so it was very safe. And having tried that and realized it's not so bad, I very much hope we can hang on to it actually as we go on. But one of the other things that's happening in amongst this acceleration is that rents are obviously adjusting. And as much as I'd like to deny it, it is actually happening. And so it doesn't matter whether it's Chelsea or Hartlepool, the shops are going to be more affordable to a broader range of uses. Now, they might be a broader range of retail, but it might open areas up more to food and drink or nightclubs or other useful uses. It might be teaching, business schools, or you see it across certainly South London as I go on my bicycle, parades of suburban shops that are now residential. You can see they've taken the whole parade out and put in. So I think the adjustment that's going on much more rapidly than it would otherwise to rents and values will also accelerate things. I think that may not be a bad thing, actually, some places.
So
not here.
We've already established that I'm a bit of a pedant, and I believe that words matter. And two of the words I hate most in the English language, especially when they're put together, are landlord and tenant, especially in conjunction with a certain act. Now, we are in a very privileged position here of having a major landlord. We've got a strong advocate for the occupier community in Amy, and then we have Mark Phillipson, who thinks he's got the answer to all of our problems with one of the new startups. So how do we start this debate? Probably with Mark.
Well, I would like to qualify your last remark. It's the reason for the launch of Total Turnover Solutions was basically to answer this issue of the increasing demand for turnover rents, which has actually been coming for a while, but COVID obviously has accelerated that like mad. And the strange thing about it is that it's not as though turnover rents haven't been around for 2 decades. The outlet centre's been using them very, very successfully for a long, long time. And, even into or capital shopping centres as they were, they were building their schemes 20 years ago and introducing turnover top-ups then. Now, I think there's quite a remarkable difference between turnover top-ups, i.e. a base rent, and then hopefully getting a little bit more, really as a bit of a bobby bonus at the end of the year or whatever, versus the outlet model, which is really, really proactive. And the more I looked into the way they operated through my pals at Realm, the more I really understood why the outlet sector generally seems to have higher sales densities, happier tenants, and it's a much more honest relationship because there isn't security of tenure. There are breaks based on turnover or turnover thresholds in favour of both landlords and tenants. So at the end of the day, if it's not working, everybody has to face that reality. And the reason why it's not working is because the store, whatever it's doing, it's not popular enough with the customers. So either that means everybody's attention gets focused on, right, can we put this right? If so, how do we do it? And if we can't put it right, maybe we should all just walk away because it's clearly not the right offer for this particular scheme or market or whatever. And I think, one of the downsides of the Landlord and Tenant Act was that it did allow either landlord or tenant positions sometimes to be abused. And, you're right, Mark, that those old terms of landlord and tenant, it is way out of date. It's professional investors and it's very professional retailers or occupiers that now run these facilities. And it's gone a long way from the old feudal system, and anything we can do to get away from a leasing system that's like that for either party to abuse, I think is healthy, because it'll end up with a more honest relationship. And I think provided occupiers see that they're going to get more back as a result of sharing their turnover data, i.e. more transparency about how marketing budgets are spent, more transparency about how their sector peers are getting on, it can help them, and it does help them, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's already there.
That's a well reasoned argument, but putting it to Amy in a slightly different way. So Mark is basically saying we can offer this flexibility, we can align our interests through turnover, but if it ain't working, we can turf you out. Now, you've obviously campaigned very hard for occupiers who have got landlords who don't think it's working, maybe because they want to put a 50-story tower on the site of the pub or whatever it is. That's going to be a problem for you, surely?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, Mark, you raised some really good points there, that it seems like the system isn't fit for purpose anymore. But I still think what, you're proposing really does tip the balance and give all of the knowledge in the hands of the owners. And what I'd like to see is a model that is maybe a bit more balanced. And if what we need going forward is an animated high street or shopping area, if we need an improved public realm, if we need extended opening hours, if we need an ecosystem that actually works for everyone, then we need to find a model that actually respects everyone. I'm really proud that the mayor and I have been able to put forward policies in the London plan that protect pubs, that protect LGBTQ+ venues, that protect grassroots live music venues, that protect the kinds of places and spaces that make London London, that if we lose it, we will never get those international tourists back, quite frankly, because we will lose our place in the world. And this is, of course, for you about the bottom line, but it's also about something bigger than that as well. And we have to make sure that we keep that essence of London that comes from that mix and that ecosystem. So
I agree with that, Amy.
Like, what can we do to help them thrive?
Sorry, I agree with you entirely, actually, and I would just qualify my remarks by saying that the turnover rents process is just about a number. The tenant mix and the asset manager of the wider estate is something different, and I think that's really that seems to me to be the thrust of your point, in that it's not just about the money, it's about the mix and the diversity and everything that goes with it. And I'd absolutely agree with that, because I think the tenant mix and asset management from that point of view is what creates vitality. And in return, vitality creates income ultimately, because everybody loves it and everybody spends their money there. So they do go hand in hand. I agree.
Yeah, I do think that's right. I mean, we dumped the landlord and tenant a very long time ago. We have customers who are retailers, and we work with them because we're responsible for a wider area and the success of that. So we need to work together on it. So we develop business plans with our customers, so it meets their needs and they can trade successfully and be part of a wider ecosystem. But behind all this as well, and I think part of what Mark's referring to, is the landlord and tenant legislation, which creates a very confrontational relationship between landlords and tenants, retailers and property owners. And we've also junked that a long time ago. So we contract outside the Landlord and Tenant Act. We've got rid of rent reviews. We just have indexation. And there's really good reason for that, because it puts us far more alongside the occupiers. It means that any rental growth is much more in tune with the inflation in their business. And it also allows us to curate the area, so we can get that diversity and that mix in here to ensure the broader area remains vibrant and successful. And so the retailers concentrate on retailing rather than selling their lease and making money from that. And we concentrate on making sure we've got the right mix. Now, by being outside of landlord and tenant legislation, not having rent reviews, it allows us then to vary rents depending on the type of business. And that's really critical. And because different businesses around here can afford different levels of rent. And that's what I really mean by an ecosystem. So you can inject that diversity and interest and excitement to the area through those means. So, but we're very fortunate. We're able to do that because we have the ability to influence a wide area that's close together. It's much more difficult on those high streets, sorry, Mark, where it's piecemeal ownership. And I think there's other solutions needed there.
I think it's fair to say, you know, that the behaviours you're talking about are absolutely exemplar, and we all wish we could move to that better world. You know, you're in this privileged position of being able to take a 100-year view on your estate management. There's not many people who can do that. You did studiously avoid the topic of turnover rents, though. Is that something you're having? You maybe you're not embracing, or is that something people are trying to?
It's interesting. I think that there are two very different formats. The outlet centre on turnover rents that Mark refers to, and these longer term destinations. What we find is that retailers want a longer period, a longer security of tenure, because they're investing so much in their shop fit. And really, in many cases, it's some of these luxury shops are investing many millions in their shop fit. So they need to know they're going to be in that shop for some time to get a return. Whereas in an outlet centre, their security is very, very much shorter than that. So we've created an environment where they can still invest in their shops, and then we do vary rents relative to different types of businesses, which is about viability. Where necessary, Mark, we do turnover rents, where we're attracting in a new and untried retailer, or we've got small retailers we want to retain in the area and there's uncertainty around their business. But we're investors in property, not retail. And property needs longer term funding. It's very capital heavy. And so to attract that funding at sensible levels, at sensible cost, we need more security of income looking forward. Whereas retailers are established, they're in control of their business. They can control those risks much better than we can. But having said that, we do provide turnover rents where appropriate, and we're doing an awful lot at the moment in order to support businesses in the area, which isn't very lucrative for us, but it protects the ecosystem and keeps these businesses alive for the future, which is important.
I'm loving the vibe from the whole panel. I think we're all optimists and we're all pragmatic and we're all very much embedded in community wealth building. So what do we have to avoid doing again so we don't make the same mistakes again? We are in a bad place structurally. We're in a bad place because of things like the landlord and tenant act. What's the one change each of you think we need to make to build towards a better future?
Not take retail for granted, and understand it's a small part of a bigger picture, which is about meeting the needs of local communities. And if we can get to that, then I think we've got a chance. I think we need to see much more intervention and encouragement of intervention for local authorities. And also the encouragement of bids. I think they've got a very important part in providing much more about providing strategic leadership than just cleaning streets. I think we need to position them at that level. And I think government still hasn't learned the lesson that it must not undermine retail. It's removed tax-free shopping at the worst possible time. It's failed to address business rates, which is overdue. It's proposing introducing changes to enfranchisement, which will make mixed-use developments much more difficult to manage. And so it needs to think much more carefully and focus on the future of retail and the health of retail.
Amy, there was a lot of nodding there. So would you want
I agree with so much that Hugh said, and I think that the point about local authorities playing a greater role is a really important one, because licensing and planning is absolutely key to the survival of this sector. Because if we talk about that ecosystem, we need to be able to expand those opening hours. We need to spread things out. So that's one thing I'd like to see. The role of bids and town centre managers are absolutely crucial to this as well. My eye is really on the planning white paper at the moment, because I think this is something that is really going to affect our high streets in potentially damaging ways. There are some positive aspects to it as well. And I just think we do have an opportunity with COVID to build back in a way that is more relevant for our communities and for our city. The other thing I'd say is we shouldn't take London for granted either. Hugh says we shouldn't take retail for granted. I don't think we should take London for granted. You know, we've seen how the central activity zone has become hollowed out because of the lack of international tourists and office workers going in. You know, it's pretty grim, and we need to be able to come back stronger than ever. It's going to take a while.
I've got a positive question to finish with, but just to finish off this question, Mark, you know, what one thing on your wish list to make a difference?
Well, I think the one thing that I wish really would happen would be that the government would get a grip of this sort of stuff, because both Amy and Hugh have very succinctly covered all of the things that are really important to make the right thing happen for the future. And as Amy just touched on, you know, you could say the one positive thing that has come out of this crisis, or coming out of this crisis, is that we've had a very good opportunity to focus on what we have got and what we haven't got anymore, and whether we want it back or not. And continued failure to, you know, address even the most obvious things like the rating system. I mean, that just can't go on, because it's taxing the hell out of things before they can even get off the ground. And much that I applaud their you know, initiatives to you know, give capital injection into high streets and things like this with the various funds they've got. You know, I saw Andy Street's press release about Wolverhampton getting £15 million. I mean, that's enough to redevelop 50,000 square feet in Wolverhampton on 38 acres, I think they were trying to cover. I mean, it's just nothing, because there'll be VAT on that and everything. You know, if they're going to do these things, I applaud the money they're putting for regeneration, but they've really got to do it in a tax efficient manner and address the big issues like rates without delaying it even further, because it's just screaming out to be done.
I think the two things arising from all of your comments. One, I think we've got another series of at least 6 panels of an hour to cover these. Interactions with government, with High Street Task Force, I've got a lot of homework to do. In my defence, I've been doing it for 6 months, and I'm on my 3rd High Street Minister already. So
oh my word.
Sometimes difficult to make things land. Let's start with a very quick, punchy, positive answer. So 10 years' time, we all know we're going to be in a much better place. How will we know that our high streets, great word, are in a better place in 10 years' time? What's it going to look like, and how are we going to measure it? Quick answers, please, guys.
Well, easy. Are they more vibrant than where they are now? Vibrancy is life. It's the key. That's the measuring factor for me.
It's difficult to better that, but it is about being relevant to the community and in a way, the measurement's the problem, because that's a very much subjective thing. And if you boil it down to measurement, then it might deliver what you measure, and that might not be the right target.
Amy, final word?
Well, for me, I think it would be ensuring that our high streets are vibrant, of course, but also ensuring that they're open later, and that there's an integrated lighting strategy for the public realm to ensure that all these places look beautiful and welcoming and safe, so people feel absolutely wonderful about going out and shopping and eating and spending time with their friends and family on our high streets.
Brilliant stuff. Look, so I think you've got four passionate people on a panel who all believe there is a brighter future. It's been an absolute delight talking to all three of you. It's been a great debate. I hope the audience have enjoyed it as much as I have. So thank you very much.
Likewise, very well hosted.
Thanks for hosting.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.